So you can visit this URL attend.zoho.com. The key is Zoho. Case doesn't matter, just Zoho. So if you are able to connect, I hope you're able to connect. So my topic today is identifying markets. First, a disclaimer. It's impossible for anyone to be 100% sure ahead of time in all these. You don't, in other words, market identification is not, it's not a function call. That is, you make a identify market function call and you get a value. Software terminology. It's much more of an interactive flow. You attempt something, then maybe it fails, maybe it succeeds marginally, maybe you reposition it, reinvent yourselves. All of that is involved. In other words, the market identification itself is a piece of software, big program. It's not one function call. Just keep that in mind because it's often thought of as, there is no secret sauce, there is no magic formula, there is no, absolute way to certainly identify an opportunity. Because if there is one, people would have already exploited it. That's the problem, right? If there's a surefire formula, people would have already exploited it, so it's no longer an opportunity. And in fact, a lot of things are surprising opportunities, not obvious in hindsight, or not obvious in foresight ahead of time, only obvious in hindsight. Even this is true for famous companies. In Google search, actually people thought search is already done and nobody cares for search. It's the portals like Yahoo had already won, search engines don't matter. In fact, Yahoo thought that. Yahoo thought search engines don't matter, which is why probably one of the dumbest decisions ever was Yahoo actually made Google their search engine. I don't know how many of you knew this. In 1998, 99, the search powering Yahoo was actually Google. That was true for the next 4 or 5 years. By then, Google had just taken over the market, basically. So essentially, Yahoo handed all the traffic to Google for free. For free, absolutely for free. Think about that. And why was that? Because they missed the thing that search is actually the biggest opportunity and not the portal. Even in India, we had a lot of portals that all came and went. So it's important to keep that in mind because what is an opportunity and what is not an opportunity is not obvious at all. And not obvious ahead of time. It's sometimes obvious only in hindsight and sometimes even that people miss. Even after someone else has actually done it, people miss that there was actually an opportunity there. So keep all this in mind. And the second is, a lot of what I'm going to talk about is only based on personal experience. I have never raised $100 million and burnt it or expanded rapidly, so I cannot give you advice on that. So there's lots of places you can get advice on that, but I wouldn't be the right person to do that. So if you have lots of investment already lined up, you are in the wrong place because you are not going to get much useful advice from me on that. And you have a lot of people to advise you on how to spend money, so that's easy. And so when you are in that, you are a nobody. All of us start as nobodies, right? So what do you do? What things likely won't work? I say likely because I cannot be sure that actually won't work, okay? I'm just telling you likely, maybe this won't work. The first thing that a college student thinks is, let's build a new operating system, right? People always think that. Why don't you build a new operating system? Actually, there may be some very niche opportunities there. Maybe an embedded operating system, something that 3 people can build that goes into, let's say, this Internet of Things. A washing machine needs an operating system. Those kinds of things, there may be an opportunity. But no, if you're going to do a mobile operating system, let's say you want to win Samsung as a customer, that's at least $1 billion problem, okay? It's not that it costs $1 billion to develop it. Just that you first have to, you build it, then you have to make sure you get some of the smaller people sign up, and then the bigger and bigger, and it takes a lot of investment, and you cannot charge for it because already Android is free. Why would anybody pay for another operating system, right? In fact, Microsoft has faced the same problem which is why they have made the price of Windows 0 on mobile. Windows still costs money on the desktop, but on the mobile phone, Windows is actually free now, because Android has made it free. So this probably won't work. As I said, on the other hand, maybe an operating system in a small niche devices, that may be an opportunity if you can build it really well. There are people who do this, but there may be opportunities, but you don't want to just go after the big market first. And again, let's build a social network, right? Again, I said likely, there are probably opportunities in building social networks, but not the social network that 2 billion people will connect. The future social networks may be more specific, smaller scale, focused. So it's not that, again, technically you cannot build it. A social network is not that hard to build. But actually getting all the user base without any revenue in the beginning, right? Social network is something you cannot charge, it's free. Everything is free already. So again, $1 billion problem. This is another one. Let's build a browser. There's 4 free browsers already, and they're all very good. So what are you going to do building a browser that, how would you ever charge, how do you ever make money, right? So again, this, because if you are just purely a software engineer, you get excited about this. Maybe, I'm going to build an awesome browser. People have tried these, by the way, and these are reliably, they burn a lot of cash. They don't get a lot of users. On the other hand, there was an opportunity in 2002-03 to build a browser. The reason was Netscape died, IE dominated, IE was stagnant. Microsoft always, what happens is, once they win the market, they destroy all innovation. They don't innovate, they won't let anyone else innovate. So they owned the market. IE had 95% market share in 2002. The market was crying for something, anything, alternative, right? Then this Firefox, Mozilla browser, Firefox. Firefox was actually built by a kid, 19-year-old, by the way, at that time. He just took the Mozilla code base and packaged it into a nice browser. It was also open source. Mozilla, originally, the browser was very geeky. It was not very usable, but Firefox is a sleek browser. It launched and then got a lot of mileage. In fact, Google funded it. The way Google funded it is the search in Firefox, Google shared revenue with Firefox. The reason Google did that was also to build up another browser, because if IE was going to win everything, Microsoft would have used IE to destroy Google. They would have put Bing as the default search engine. If your browser is running on 95% of all devices, and the default is going to be Bing, or whatever Microsoft search was going to be called at the time, Google had no play. So Google was smart enough to recognize it and build up Firefox. You have to remember, these are all chess games. You have to, at that level, you think, what is the opponent's strategy? How am I going to counter it, right? So Google built up Firefox by actually subsidizing them, essentially sharing the revenue. But today, would Google subsidize the next browser? No, they have Chrome. They don't need to subsidize you or anybody, right? So there was an opportunity in 2002. It was smart to recognize that, Firefox actually was, even though it was a non-profit open source, it still pulls in more than 150 million in revenue per year. It was doing so by 2004, 5, 6 time frame. It was doing 50, 60 million revenue just based on that search, making the default to Google, and Google was sharing the revenue. And then Google realized that they need their own browser. They built Chrome, but it became a much more open market. So today, is there an opportunity? It's hard to see it. I don't see how we could do this. And closer to home, Flipkart, Uber, these are all now the popular companies. Well, Flipkart raised $1 billion. Uber has raised maybe, I don't know, 2 billion. So it's lots of ways to spend money if you go up against them. You'll spend lots of money and you will get a little bit of market share. So it's probably not a good idea, I'd say, to get. On the other hand, there may be peripheral opportunities there. As Flipkart becomes a platform, there may be opportunities on top of it, not directly against them for a small company. So, and finally, let's build an office suite, right? It's a joke because we actually do this, right? How stupid is that? Why would we go up against it? It's not actually, first of all, we only started building this in 2005-06, not in 96. I wouldn't have done it in 96. So, because that would be stupid. Then why in 2006, why are we doing it? Well, we are a much bigger company, we have the resources to invest, number one. Two, here's the reason actually. The Office suite brings something like $20 billion in profit to Microsoft every year. 20 billion. Just to put that in perspective, the largest IT company in India, TCS, maybe does 12, 15 billion in revenue. Revenue, not profit. So Microsoft makes more profit on the Office suite than all of TCS makes in revenue. So, and there is very little competition to them. Well, now there's Google. There's not that much else. There's one rule of thumb in business is, whenever there's somebody making lots of money on something, and they are not spending much on it, by the way. The Office suite is not that, a search engine is a lot harder to do than an Office suite. If you know anything about software, you understand all this, you will know that the Office suite is not that complicated, as complicated as a search engine. And they are making $20 billion a year. Profit, not revenue. So, when I looked at it in 2005, I said, there has to be some opportunity here to disrupt this. They're making this free money, basically free money. It is free money. Because at that point, they don't invest a lot in it. It's free money at that point. So you realize has to be some opportunity there. And there's not lots of players. Not a lot of players will dare to enter because they're still afraid of Microsoft. So these are conditions where you can, that's like how Firefox got in and, it was able to disrupt the browser market, right? Microsoft owned the entire market. So you realize the only interesting part is the same idea occurred to Google as well. And the reason it occurred to them, it's interesting, right? Google realized if Microsoft gets 20 billion in free money, every year they can put another 5, 10 billion into their search engine until they win. When you get free money, you keep investing. That's the logic. Bill Gates is very famous for that. He essentially got some monopolies and kept investing until you win. Look, in business, I tell you one thing. If you get 3, 4, 5, 8 attempts, eventually you can figure out a way to succeed. The only problem is you don't get 4, 5, 8, 10 attempts, actually. You die before that. That's the problem, right? Well, Microsoft has infinite money or cash flow like this. In search, they had infinite attempts they could make. Google realized that's a problem for them, right? Well, Google has a very profitable search engine. Microsoft is determined to break into it, and they have free money. So when you face the chess game, what do? You have to take the fight to the enemy, as they say. Any chess player will understand. You have to take the fight to the enemy. If you don't fight him where he is strong, he's going to kill you where you are strong. That's simple. It's simple logic. So they realized we have nothing to lose. Google has nothing to lose in the Office suite. They could essentially afford to give it away free, and it's not that hard to develop. Okay? We have done this. Google has done this. It's not that hard to develop. Office suite is a lot easier than a search engine, which is why we are not attempting a search engine right now. If you read news stories about us doing a search engine, I'm not that stupid yet. Maybe I'll be stupid in the future, but I'm not yet. So it's much harder, I tell you. It's not that no one can ever attempt it, but you need 10 billion, 20 billion. Okay? You need that kind of money to attempt a search engine. It's not that easy. So that's why Google entered that market. They didn't want the 20 billion free money to Microsoft, so they get infinite number of attempts to break into search. That was it, basically. In fact, Android was developed for the same reason. They thought if Microsoft, already Windows owns the desktop. This was in 2006-07 when Android they started doing, right? 2005. If Microsoft Windows was going to dominate the mobile, Google is dead as a search engine. Again, they will just in the search, they'll put the Bing as the default screen. Microsoft knows all these tricks. Everyone knows these games. It's not that hard to figure it out. If you own the device, if you know the operating system, you will put yours as the default. Billion people, 99% will choose the default. That's it. Defaults matter. So they realized that they needed a competing operating system. Not even in the wildest dreams, Google actually hoped to win that market. They only hoped to prevent Microsoft from winning it all. Their objective with Android was, maybe Microsoft won't get 95% market, maybe they'll only get 60%, 80% market, maybe they'll make it a game, right? Well, this is the example in industry where Totally unexpected happened. Android just won, basically. To the point where Microsoft is fighting for 3% share in mobile operating system. And I hope they stay at 3% because they still make too much money. If they win mobile, they're going to take over everything else. Trust me on that. So you don't want, those of you who are thinking of cooperating with Microsoft, keep that in mind. If they get 30 billion profit forever, we all die. We all eventually either leave the industry or work for Microsoft. So you don't want them to win it all. It's absolutely, history has shown it again and again and again. So be wary of Microsoft. Be wary of any big company that is attempting to monopolize everything. But Microsoft is that player, so you keep that in mind. Today they act nice because they lose. They have lost a lot. But they're not very nice when they win. Keep that in mind. So and honestly, we have not, the jury is still out on the Office suite. I'm still very optimistic because again, the market is still wide open. There's 20 billion they're pulling in. They're doing all this free on mobile, all of that. I dare them to make it free on the desktop. Then we have actually won. You know why we have won? It's not the market share that counts. It's the 20 billion denying them is what counts for us. I would dare Satya Nadella to make the Office suite free on the desktop. Then we have won, actually. Zoho has won, actually, in that case. So until then, we will be fighting. It's not free on the desktop, so we will fight. So now let me come to, so you got the flavor of business thinking, how you should think about business and all these, right? How you think like a startup, how they think. Their problem is how they protect the 20 billion, basically. The startup problem is how you disrupt the 20 billion, right? So that's the game. That is how the chess game is set up. So when you're starting out, you don't want to start out with an Office. You don't want to start out with anything big. If you start out with anything big, well, there's lots of big players who will be flooding in. And you have even well-funded startups flooding in, all the VCs flooding in. So it's going to be a tough game. It's impossible. In most cases, it's impossible. Identify micro niches that large players will ignore. I've actually met some of you here who do really interesting things, identified small opportunities that are profitable, give initial growth that you can get to 30, 40, 50 people, 100 people. I actually met some of you here. I'm always continually surprised by how many interesting things exist, okay? It's our lack of imagination is why we think there's no opportunity. I've actually met people in this very event that I didn't know before that, man, this is interesting, that I wouldn't have thought of it. Everything from WordPress-based plugins to, online e-learning things to a lot of things like this I've met. So you do have to look for niches that large players will ignore. So, for example, a 1 million market is not going to excite any large player, okay? 1 million is relatively small as a market. For anybody, no VC will invest in a 1 million market. That's good for you. If you don't have any money, VCs will avoid it, so it's good. And because in 1996, our company mission, the grand mission, the vision was this. I would keep saying this inside. Let's put food on the table, right? So you want to be, that ought to be your mission right now. If you're small, you're a nobody, this is your first goal. Put food on the table. Then you figure out the rest, right? As I will also say, you have to live to fight another day. In chess game terminology, you have to keep on living. If you get checkmated, you die, the game is over. So in startup terminology, the checkmate is you run out of cash and you have to shut down. That is checkmate. So you have to understand, you have to put food on the table, you have to continue to survive somehow. That's the first goal. And actually, I met her, interestingly, in 1997, there was a trade show, and we had a little booth. We were doing maybe about 400, at that very moment, we were doing about $300,000 in revenue, 400,000, somewhere in that, not much. Small bit of revenue. We had just gotten some customers. We were not big. We can even say, okay, $20,000 a month in revenue. That's about the level we were at that time. And a VC came to us and asked, So these products you're doing, what is the total global market for this? I took a wild guess. Look, when you're doing $20,000 a month, I thought, take a guess, and I said $10 million. I had no idea, right? So she said, why are you so unambitious? Why don't you go for a bigger market, right? That's, how many times you read about this from the VCs? Think big, think big, think big, think big. Well, as I say, VCs love premature ambition. They love it. So, but that comes with a problem though. They also demand premature execution. Okay? When we were at $20,000 a month, we were thinking big for $1 billion market. There's lots of problems. I mean, I'll tell you what the problems are tend to be. Some companies, the company that achieved the $1 billion at that time, which is starting around us, is Yahoo, for example. Well, but look at Yahoo today, right? Yahoo is at a crossroad. They don't know you. It's a safe bet in 2020 Zoho will be around. It's not a safe bet that Yahoo actually will be around. Their market is shrinking. How many of you actually even use Yahoo? Visit yahoo.com or use Yahoo Mail or any of the services, right? Why is that? Because they did that fast growth for 3, 4, 5 years. Completely lost the culture. Completely lost it along the way. So today it's at a crossroads. They've had, 4 CEOs in 8 years or 7 years. Keep on rotating new CEOs, and each one disappoints more than the last one. Because fundamentally there are cultural problems at Yahoo that it's just simply swapping out a leader will not fix easily. And that cultural problem came in the 90s. It didn't come in 2005. This is how Yahoo was built as a company. Yahoo's very foundation was this: VCs pumping, grow fast, as big as you can, as fast as you can. Guess how long it lasted? You can say Google, right? Interestingly, Google, deliberately, they did not grow in actually 98, 99 that much. They had if you think about the Google portal, that search, that minimalist page, you know why that came? That was not actually a strategy. In 98, they wanted to avoid Yahoo or other guys thinking that Google is our competition. Remember, Yahoo was a portal. It had everything. Stock, finance, everything. You had news, sports, entertainment, celebrity news, all of that, right? Well, Google is supplying the crucial search. Yahoo is paying them for every search or whatever ad, whatever. They're making some money. But if Yahoo thinks Google is actually competition, they'll cut them off, right? Obvious. Yahoo is a much bigger company. So Google stayed quietly in the shadows. In 98, 99, 2000, they made no noise at all. Absolutely none. It's hard to imagine this, if you were not around then, if I tell you the story, it's hard for you to believe it, but that was how it was. So that little minimal search thing was not so much a strategy as much as we don't want to be seen as competition by our customers. Namely Yahoo, AOL. AOL was a big customer. It was AOL and Yahoo that built Google, really, in a sense. And in 2001, 2, of course, the bubble burst. Everything was a mess. Google stayed in this thing. They actually, it was deliberate again. Later it came out. They wanted to avoid Microsoft knowing that Google was making so much money. Google is extremely strategic. They understood what Microsoft would do if they found out too soon that Google was making money. In 2001 and 2, their revenue was scaling rapidly. Traffic was growing. Because not only the Yahoo traffic, people started realizing if you go to google.com directly, its a search engine is cooler. There's not all this clutter. And they were starting to make a ton of money. In 2002, 3, nobody knew how much money Google was making, actually. They were making a lot. Why didn't they reveal it? They didn't reveal it because they didn't want Microsoft to know how well they were doing, really. That's it. There was only one reason. Everyone was really scared of Microsoft at that time. Everyone knew Microsoft, if they could, they would. They would do any tactic to unfairly destroy you. This is not some, some reckless allegation. This is the only company in history that has actually been convicted in a court of law as a convicted monopolist. Okay? You have to remember, only company in tech history. A court of law declared that these guys illegally abused monopoly. So they did a lot of shit in their time. So Google knew this, so they avoided that. So they did not have this premature execution problem. They quietly stayed out of the limelight. The bubble had burst, so no one was expecting anything anyway. They were making money, they didn't tell anyone. Really were making money, they didn't tell anyone. During their IPO, people were shocked to see how much revenue they were making. Eventually, because they had made the mistake of taking VC money, they had to go IPO. That's one of the problems, right? If you take VC money, eventually you have to do something, IPO or something. They postponed it as long as they could. Eventually, they got to go public. They had more than $1 billion in revenue and maybe 400 million in profit. People were, it's just totally shocked the world. And by then, it was a little bit too late for everyone to catch up. Yahoo cut off the relationship, but it was impossible to catch up. Microsoft realized that it's a big deal, and so they started investing. But again, Google had such momentum. And they smartly exploited it. They refused to, if you see in their 2002 page, they'll say, we are only going to be search, nothing else. That fell by the wayside. 2004, Gmail, and then Google News, Google Finance, they did everything else, and even the Office suite, right? But it happened later, you have to remember. It happened strategically. But VCs don't want later. VCs demand execution right now, premature execution. If they put 100 million, they want you to spend it. They want you to grow your team, grow your sales team, grow your marketing team. So that's the problem. And this is the problem. Premature execution is a lot harder than premature ambition. Ambition is cheap. Execution is hard. So even if you take money, it's hard. And I mentioned Yahoo, the cultural baggage. You attempt premature execution, that company is usually it doesn't sustain long term. Repeated history. Today, Cisco is facing doldrums. Okay? Again, you look at Cisco history, it is essentially put together, acquired about 100 companies. Not kidding, 100 companies. Cisco is a combination of 100 different companies, really acquired fast. So there's no culture in Cisco. There's no real culture in Cisco. And as a result, competition is able to attack and take away market share. Globally, around the world, the Chinese players, Huawei, have taken a lot of share. In the US, Juniper and other players, newer players are coming, taking away share. And they are attacked from all sides. They are not able to respond to it well because they really don't have a good culture. That's the problem. So you instantly win, but your win doesn't sustain long term. That is the problem. That's the cultural baggage. And you have to remember, so VCs get to lower their risk by diversifying, so they want you to take more risk with this premature execution. When they say they take risk, they are not taking risk. They diversify. They have 10 horses they are betting on, 100 horses they are betting on. And they'll shoot the horses that don't win. So, simple as that. Now anyway, I'll come to our stories because the really only examples can illustrate here. As you all know by now, our first product is this. This is the one that probably today it makes 1 or 2 million in revenue for us, about 1.5 million revenue approximately. It's absolutely stagnant for the last 15 years. It has always made us about 1 to 2 million revenue. It's a good small market. We are happy to be in this market. We are proud to be in this market. This is our very first market. But this is not what any VC would have ever funded a company on, right? And then our WebNMS, which came right after this SNMP, it's a bigger product. We found a very interesting niche, accidentally, I have to say. It's not like some huge vision or foresight. So the 10 million revenue came from this opportunity, exploiting this well. So you have printers in all these companies. And the printers have like paper status, paper jammed, ink status. Very valuable enterprise information, right? So, it's just a joke. And this The printer companies, not HP, the other printer companies, Kyocera, Konica Minolta, Ricoh, all these companies had a problem. They needed to give software to their customers to manage this thing. Some administrator needs to know paper is running out on these printers, or paper has jammed, or very mundane problems. Right? This happens in any larger offices where you have a bunch of printers, some of them jam, some of them don't work, some of them run out of paper, all these. So the customers are demanding some software for this. These are hardware companies, printer companies, they don't have a lot of software expertise. We had this little SNMP plugin, this WebNMS, and we met in a trade show, 2 or 3 printer vendors. They immediately took to us. They said, hey, maybe you have the solution to our problem. More interesting, I later figured out why they chose us. It turned out the biggest competition every printer vendor faced was HP. HP has dominated the printer market, maybe something like 50%. Other guys have collectively something like 50%. It turned out HP also had always had this network management software called OpenView. Many of you may know about this. So they were strong in managing these printers, all of that. They were strong in managing a lot of stuff. The other printer guys lacked that software. So it became an obvious opportunity for us. We are not HP. Obviously, the other printer guys cannot go to HP for the software. HP won't give it to them. So we became their software supplier, essentially. And our first, maybe the $1 million revenue came from this micro niche. The first $1 million came from only supplying maybe 4 or 5 printer vendors. So you can name them. Kyocera, Konica Minolta, and Minolta. It was used to be called Minolta at that time. Later it became Konica Minolta, Ricoh, and then we added Xerox later. Xerox was added about a couple of years later. Just these 4 vendors, we got to our first $1 million revenue. How small is that market? Can anybody get excited about that kind of a market? Well, it put food on the table and we got to market with that. So, in fact, that explains why we have always had an office in Japan. We opened an office in Japan realizing that a lot of our customers were coming from, because all the names I named were Japanese. So you think about it, we are an Indian company, all the software is written in India. The meetings happened in a trade show in Las Vegas. And my first trip to Japan was to meet, I believe, Minolta, one of them, I don't remember which one. Maybe Ricoh, one of them, my first visit. Since then I've gone many times. But this is how we got to the first $1 million in revenue. The first maybe 300,000 came from that SNMP API. The $1 million came from this niche market. And then you expand. But this kind of thing, it allowed us to earn skills and capital. We learned the skills. For example, what skills? In fact, in '97, we didn't know how to create a package for download. When you have all these Java, all the things, and you have to package it in one package, it sounds like a trivial problem. We actually didn't know it in '97. So that was the time this install shield type of things were coming up. So attempting to create a downloadable package that executes and auto install was not a trivial problem at that time. So we had to learn that. We had to learn a lot of things. We had to learn how to document the software, how to support it. All this is skills you learn. That initial revenue gave us the ability to learn those skills. And this is later that WebNMS became a 10 million product. It's then Manage Engine became possible through that skills we learned. And from that made Zoho possible. So it's you see every step was reliant on the previous step. Zoho was not possible without that whole WebNMS. That's why I said, I didn't create that product, by the way. WebNMS is not my idea. It was Tony and Kumar and all of them did. So I figured out how to make money out of it. That was my contribution. I realized that the printers were an opportunity. We strongly went after printers after that. So Xerox, all that came along because of that push. And there is a broader, now I'll switch to a thing. Jeff Bezos has a dictum. It's really useful for anyone to remember. Your margin is my opportunity. Microsoft's 20 billion margin is our opportunity. Think of it that way. Okay? Business is, to a good extent, it's good war. See, war you might think of as bad, right? In business, war is good. Why is war good? When the Android guys fight it out, we get better phones, cheaper phones, right? War is good for customers. Ultimately, customer is the god in business. All the businessmen fight to serve the customer. So war among businessmen is actually good for the customer. Keep that in mind. So you are in business, you are a warrior. You have to think of yourself as a warrior. You are fighting for that customer. You are fighting your competition. Don't let anyone bullshit you like it's all cooperation, all that. It's bullshit. We fight. You have to fight. Business is fight. And business is war. It's a good war, though. It's a good war because it creates prosperity. Look, today, the humblest Indian can actually afford a smartphone. It's what, 6,000 rupees now? 7,000 rupees? Good smartphone. It's unbelievable. Actually, there was a slide, one of our presenters had a slide, I don't remember. The first Nokia phone was, actually the little phone was 12,000 rupees. Then, it was maybe 10 years ago. Now the latest Android phone is only 6,000. It's how many times better, and 6,000 rupees is not buying the same thing 6,000 rupees even bought them, right? It's unbelievable how far these things have progressed. It's all competition. So the customer wins when we fight. So your margin is my opportunity is how every businessman should think. That's a good thought. You look for where there is some high margins being enjoyed, and you target that for disruption. You find niches to exploit, disrupt. And that explains globally why the product business is better, right? I mean, product business is where all these guys are, there's vast fortunes have been built on it. As I said, Microsoft Office alone is $20 billion a year in profit. Again and again, I emphasize. So there is opportunity there. There must be opportunity there somewhere. And now there is somewhere I would say for a smaller business, how do you contextualize it to your need? Unsexy but profitable beats the sexy cash model. You have to always drill it into your head. In the beginning, don't go for the sexy opportunity, but the unsexy, profitable niche. The printer, find your printers. So that's where then you scale up, you scale up, you scale up. If you look at industrial history in India or anywhere in the world, any conventional, forget this whole startup thing, okay? Forget this, because you have to study broader lessons of history. Study the history of Honda. Study the history of Ambani. Study all of this. You will find this again and again. Everyone started with an unsexy business first. Ambani, that's very famous. I'm actually old enough to remember the Vimal, only Vimal advertisement in TV. That was the very first TV commercials. Actually, that was their entire business, that whole saris at the time, only Vimal. And it's unbelievable how far they have come from that humble roots, right? So it's the same thing with Honda. If you look at Honda, you study them. The very first business was attaching little engines to bicycles. It's not a motorcycle. Just attach a little engine to a bicycle. So that's their first business. It's not a tough business, right? That's an unsexy business. So you want to find those kinds of opportunities. Study history. Don't just look at this immediate bubble. Don't just read what the latest VC is saying, because those are not where the true wisdom, insights are coming from. Study the 50-year history. Actually, yesterday, Paras mentioned this. He said, I look to history, last 200 years, 300 years of history in terms of business. This last 10, 20 years is a kind of only a small time frame in this. So study history. You will study these books, read these books about all these, how Honda did it, how Reliance did it, how all of these companies, and you will get a lot of insights from it. And again, yesterday I mentioned this, celebrate being nobody. Obscurity is a virtue. Don't think of I'm obscure as a problem. Seize that as an opportunity. So What do? Then you can launch a product, you fail, nobody cares, right? It's not like Economic Times is going to put a headline, so-and-so failed miserably, what an idiot. There's no headlines like that, right? So you don't have to worry about failing. Nobody cares, right? Exploit that. So that's a key. Celebrate being a nobody. Because that is when you have the maximal freedom, in a way, to fail. Maximal freedom to fail, to be a fool. You know, too many times, our only problem is we think maybe 3 of our friends will make fun of us. You know, that's only 3 of your friends. There's like 3 billion people in the world who don't know you. So don't worry about it, you know. And if those 3 of your friends bother you a lot, move to another city. Change your friends, you know. I have actually done these things. In other words, you are afraid that 3 friends will make fun of you. Move to another city, change your friends. How easy is that, you know? So think like that. Celebrate being a nobody. So again, I emphasize this. Let the well-funded guys mine gold. Sell them picks and shovels. It's well known. This is not some fundamental insight here. This is well known. But we just forget these things. Picks and shovels made more fortunes than actually gold mining. You know that? There is one company that was born in gold mining era that's still vibrant. Levi's jeans. They sold the jeans to gold miners. They are the only ones around of that era. None of the gold miners, no one is around actually. So, and again, this is the story I'm going to. Yesterday, I think I briefly alluded to it. This was an opportunistic exploitation of an opportunity. This was the gold mine. That's why I say the picks and shovels in the gold mining opportunity. There was this optical networking boom in 98, 99, 2000. Major boom, which is mirroring the current boom. Current boom in cloud reminds me exactly of that boom, the 98, 99, 2000 boom. So we had, but we were not an optical networking company, thank God, because we would have died if we were. You would hear every single day, there was no TechCrunch at the time, but there were no websites that carried news, but you will read it in more regular newspapers. Things like $50 million raised by Optimite, or you name it. I even forget all the names now. In fact, one of the companies some of you may be familiar with was Sycamore Networks, which in 2000, that company was valued by the stock market at $50 billion. 2 years ago, they dissolved the last remnants of that company. They had some maybe 10, 20 million left from the money they had raised. They returned it to the shareholders. There was a last victim of the optical bubble, which only shut down 2 years ago. They were walking dead all along. They didn't have a business really, but they had raised lots of money. They were spending it slowly. Eventually, they threw in the towel and said, there's no point. So that was only 2, 3 years ago. You can go look it up, Sycamore Networks. But they were worth $50 billion in 2000, in the peak of the bubble. And what were we doing in that bubble? We actually, the printers happened, right? First million. Then immediately after that was the optical bubble. And that we smoothly transitioned from serving printer market to serving optical equipment. It's a huge leap in a sense because one is humble, non-mission critical kind of thing. Optical networks are the backbone of the internet. And we are trying to sell software to manage it. I remember the very first presentation I went to an optical networking company. So they asked, so who are your current customers? I said, all these printer guys. They said, what, printer guys? And you are coming to us to sell this? So the director of marketing there took me aside, Indian again. I got a lot of advice from the Indian customers. They'd say, don't be an idiot. Next time, don't mention the printers as your customers because that's not marketing, that's negative marketing. So hide the fact that you supply to printers. So my next time I presented it, I didn't mention printers. So next time I go to the optical company, I don't mention printers anymore. So you learn, this is marketing, right? So, but that market proved to be a picks and shovels for us. Typical scenario, a company would raise 10 million, 20 million in venture capital. They would set up a hardware team, they would set up all that. Then they need the software to manage it. It turned out there were only 2 or 3 companies. In fact, we were the only company in 98, 99. Then sensing opportunity, 2 more startups came in. They raised lots of money. We didn't have money, we didn't raise money. These guys raised lots of money. And we had a better product, but they had a lot better sales and marketing, which may sound familiar to some of you now in this bubble. And we held on to those 2 companies, gained maybe 50% of the market. We had 50% of the market because we were early entrant. But they were winning faster. In 2000, there was even a doubt whether they are winning faster than us. I mean, if there were press at the time, they would have asked, is Advenet, the name of the company, too conservative to win this market? They would have said. But I felt they were spending too much money. They were each raised $25, $30 million. They were spending it on lots of sales and marketing. And we had a higher market share, but we were it looks like we were going to lose that market share at that time. Actually, this is how it looked in November 2000, this is how the world looked, actually. Are these guys going to hold on to this initial lead in this market because these VC companies are so aggressive? Well, a year later, the bubble had burst completely. Then September 11 also happened, right? This was 2001. And we had a very frugal operation. We saved up money. These guys were spending like crazy. Both of them went out of business by 2002-03. So the entire remaining, whatever little market was ours. There wasn't much left, but it was ours though at that point. So, which is the weird thing, right? So we were the picks and shovels guys for those optical companies. So they will raise 20 million, they will call us, and we'll sell them a $50,000 or $100,000 piece of software to bundle with their equipment, all that. So that was what got us to the first 10 million revenue. So again, picks and shovels rather than sexy. We were not the sexy optical company. We were the picks and shovels guys to them. So then there's another tip: find an emerging platform and build on it. Right? There's lots of new. Flipkart could be a platform today, for example. There is a platform, emerging platform. And for example, WebNMS itself was built on Java. It's an emerging platform in 96. 95, Java was hot, right, as they say. So we actually developed all of it in Java at that time, so which gave us an edge. We were one of the very few companies that had software in Java. People wanted software in Java because it could run on Windows, it could run on Linux, it could run on Solaris. Solaris was a big deal at that time. And similarly, for Zoho itself, we recognized the cloud opportunity. Actually, we had been looking at it since 2003-04, but we decided to go in a big way by 2006, which proved to be a good move because since then it's expanded vastly. There wasn't a cloud bubble in 2006, by the way, as it is now. Sometimes we are too tuned to very recent history. You have to look back even 6, 7, 8 years. You will see that whatever is obvious now didn't even seem obvious 4 years ago. So you have to recognize this bias of the immediate news. We are all like creatures of habit. You read something today, you think you are influenced by it. So maybe you should read the news 5 years ago, 8 years ago, how the world looked then. Then you will see better patterns. You will see what is maybe transient, what may be more durable. I do believe the cloud is real. See, optical networking was real in the sense that the internet massively expanded, and it was all based on fiber optics. So it's not that there's no real opportunity. The problem was 300 companies were chasing it. There was not enough opportunity for 300 players. Again, the same thing is true now. I don't believe there's opportunity for 3,000 cloud companies. Okay? There's not opportunity for 3,000 cloud companies. You have to keep that in mind. You don't be foolish and think that, oh, we'll be this one player will beat the odds, because most will not. So the 3,000, if there has 3,000 players, it's a problem. If we were the 8th SNMP API vendor, we would be dead. We just identify a micro niche where there's not many players. right? If you look at Wingify, for us, the opportunity there is the A/B testing market didn't have 100 players yet when he entered. So you have to, you know what, this is a trick actually, I'll come to this. If you have 0 players, it's a problem, but I'll talk about this in a second. So ideas. Many of you, this is again repeated, this is actually not new again, ideas are worth nothing. This is something that I always internally tell in Zoho. If an idea occurs to us, it has already occurred to 10 other people in the world. 7 of them have started doing it, 3 of them have shipped. Sorry to break it to you. Any idea whatsoever, this is true. Okay? If anybody tells me I have no competition at all, I say you haven't looked hard enough. That's it. Okay? So I have found this through real experience. Ideas are worthless, absolutely worthless. So, and you can get lots of free ideas. So, it's worthless, that means all the ideas are free. That means you might as well take all the ideas from anywhere else too. They're all out there, okay? And so it's execution. And if you tell me there is competition, important, there is always competition, always. Always. So, in fact, the competition may be something like, they actually don't need the product at all. That's also a form of competition. That means the substitute is doing nothing. So you have to persuade the customer why actually they need to even act, right? So that is also competition. But keep in mind that as a rule, there is always competition, anything. There are many other substitutes. There's many forms of substitutes. People will do, let's put this in perspective, right? There's such a profusion of goods and services in modern life. There's really so few things that are absolutely essential for survival. Food, water, maybe clothing, shelter. Other than that, everything is actually in some sense luxurious, right? You absolutely cannot live without a smartphone? No, it's not true. We can. We lived without smartphones. Right? So, you have to remember, there's always competition. There's always something that's an alternative to whatever you're offering. You have to keep that in mind because most rookie entrepreneurs make this mistake that there's no competition for whatever I do. That misleads them into making bad decisions. So if you have an idea with no competition at all, there is probably no market. That's why when I said, find an obscure opportunity, not so obscure that there's no market at all. That's a hard balancing act, you see. If there are 100 players, maybe it's hard. If there are no players, maybe it's hard. There's no market. So you have to find that happy medium somewhere. That's the trick. Okay, that is the hardest part actually. That's the hardest part. So what do? You just go through lots of. What you do is you don't get attached to any one idea in the beginning. Don't get fixated on something. Look at lots of things open-mindedly. You are a student, you are studying. You understand what do these guys do? What do these guys do? How do they make money? This is what business schools would call case study. But here you are doing it as, for example, you think about this. Interesting A/B testing market, right? You think about it. You have websites, and then you have A/B testing. It turns out A/B testing makes more money than websites. It's interesting. There are website creation companies, there are A/B testing companies. Website creation, A/B testing is better market. That's an insight that's not obvious ahead of time, right? That only you can validate. Even closely related markets, this is true. This happens to be true. So you have to now, you study maybe 100 different things. You can easily find them to study now. The internet is your friend, right? Google it. Find a lot about each thing. More obscure, the better, but there are sometimes the most interesting ones, I tell you, are the ones where there's a company that nobody is talking about much, but they're making lots of money. No, actually, Zoho is not that. Zoho is lots of people are talking about it. So, so you have such companies exist, by the way. Google was that company in 2003. Now, Google was used by lots of people, but nobody knew they were actually making lots of money. Lots of money. I mean, impossible amounts of money, even by 2003. So today, just to put this in perspective, when you pay $10 for a click, it's costing them less than 1 penny. The click. So, shocker, right? That's the Google leverage, actually. It's even more profitable than even Windows in say a day. It's incredible. So you find opportunities where some competition is making money. They're reasonably not well known. Then you have, and there's not lots of players, there are some players. And then how can you execute that? Well, you have an opportunity here, right? As Paras mentioned, the biggest advantage you have in India is that your runway is longer, as I say. You can survive longer. Living with parents to all of that. An apartment, even in hyper-inflated Bangalore in outskirts, maybe 15,000 rupees will get you an apartment for rent. No, I don't recommend buying here. Okay? So I pity the people who are paying 2 crores for an apartment buying here. Fools. Because it's not worth 2 crores now. But you rent it. Whenever it's hyperinflated, I always rent. Even now. Renting is better than buying in real estate, so rent. So that's only 15,000, even in somewhere of the less sexy parts of Bangalore, maybe, right? Maybe not right here, not in Residency Road, but somewhere a little bit outside. But when you go to a little bit off, it drops dramatically. 5,000 rupees. You can get a nice place for rent. You know how incredible that is? I'll just give you an idea. If you are in San Francisco right now, your rent for a 1-bedroom is pushing $3,000. That's almost 2 lakhs versus 20,000 in Bangalore. Or 10,000 somewhere else. So it's 10,000 versus maybe 1.5, 2 lakhs. At least 15 times. The rent alone is killing you, basically. You can run the entire company on something it costs to rent an apartment in San Francisco. Now you think about all those VCs who are pushing companies to be in San Francisco. How stupid is that? I tell you something about business. Costs don't matter until they matter. These things matter. It matters. Trust me, maybe in 2 years, these words will be maybe ring even more true when the bubble bursts. Costs absolutely matter. The only reason we survived in that bust, and those 2 companies that raised venture funding and competed against us didn't survive, they bloated their cost structure. They just went and hired a lot of sales and marketing. They created fancy offices. This was true too. A customer that chose them versus us told us, hey, I come to your office, it looked like a hole in the wall. We had a hole in the wall, actually. We were cheap. And I go to their office, it looks more professional. He bought their software. Well, they died, so. Their fancy office killed them. So don't ever trust these. I am always, one good thing about growing up, not very lower middle classes, I have very low taste. I don't have expensive taste. Hole in the wall is fine. I'm happy. So I don't need to stay in the Ritz. I usually stay in like a Super 8. Motel 6 in the US. That's cheap, right? So they're nice room, clean room, nice comfortable bed. What more do we need, right? But too many people get addicted to that prestige, that luxury. So that's the problem. So find niches, keep your costs low, and you have a long runway. Experiment. That I cannot emphasize more. So the very first thing you think, the thing you attach to may not make you money. The second thing may not. The third thing may not. You have to find something that works. I cannot tell you what will work. Okay? Nobody can. Don't trust anyone who gives you any magic secret formula. The only thing is to experiment, keep trying some things, and reality be the judge, right? Reality be your guide. Because too often we assume that the world is the way we think it is. The world has its own ideas. The world is not whatever we think, whatever in my head I have the idea. So if you let the reality unfiltered enter your mind, unfiltered, even if it violates your assumptions, even if it proves you wrong, if you are able to see the reality, you are able to respond faster to it. So this is the thing. Competition also validates markets. Actually, competition is good because in some sense I say the existence of a player who's making money is proof that the market exists, right? If somebody is doing it, making money, that proves that the market exists. If nobody exists in something you think of, you have to worry that maybe there is no market. And this is a key thing. Zoho is actually now a well-resourced company in the sense that we have the know-how, the capital, the people to attempt bigger scale problems like the Office suite. So we are in every respect, we have the execution capability of people with hundreds of millions of dollars who have raised in VC. But that's not how we were then, right? So you have to think of it as the -4. You're starting the -4, year -4. You're not starting in year 0. You're starting in year -4. The first 4 years, you are figuring out how to be a business, pay your bills, learn that is the business school. So this is the message I'll give you. Treat those 4 years as your real education in business. Far, far better than any business school will give you. Business schools are a waste of time. It's far more precious. So you will learn lessons. And if you let reality be the guide, observe, look for micro niches, execute, move faster than a competition, keep your cost structure low. I actually have an entire presentation on location. I don't know if I have time to give it now. Location, location, location. People say location, location, location. I say it because ultimately, real estate determines all other costs around. Singapore, why is Singapore so expensive now? Real estate is super expensive. Bangalore, all that. So when you go into an expensive place, what you're doing is, you're going to a place where it's already established prestige, and you're paying for that prestige, basically. Coming to Ritz-Carlton, we are paying for the Ritz-Carlton brand, the prestige, basically. That's what we are doing, most of it. So, are you in business to pay for the landlords who already have established the prestige of that area? Think about it hard, because if you do that, most of your money is going out to pay the rent and all of this. Too many companies are doing this, actually, today. They want the prestigious office location. In Zoho, we have always thought different. And in Chennai, we always had an obscure complex. If you saw, recently we moved to DLF, but 3 years ago, until before that, we were in a very obscure corner in Velachery. And the office looked like nothing at all, hole in the wall, as they say. But internally, we furnished it nice. We also actually had free lunch, all of that. We have had it for a long time. I always will tell the employees, the free lunch is easy for us. We save the rent and we give you free lunch, which is actually better for everyone, right? We save the rent and provide free lunch. So I say, don't even thank me, just that we are just saving the rent. So you should do that. I would recommend, actually things like free lunch is very good. The reason it's very good is it saves time. If you have lots of bachelors or employees, don't force them to go out. You are inflicting Bangalore on them. You are inflicting traffic on them. So provide free lunch, maybe free dinner, whatever. Food is good to provide. But cut on the rent. Don't pay the landlord, pay in rent. So these are all the things that I will small pieces of advice. This way you actually have more satisfied employees and you are able to withstand longer any adversity. You are able to run longer because adversity is inevitable. There will always be some setback or another. Your ability to withstand it is what distinguishes you from somebody who just dies in business. So you keep that in mind. With that, I'm going to close this. I have some micro nuggets I will maybe present during the rest of the day. Thank you.